Henry Ford once said, if everyone is moving together forward, then success takes care of itself. With that in mind, let's move on to the next session, which focuses on the power of coming together and collaborating to achieve common goals. To introduce our next session, Collaborative, to be or not to be, I invite on stage my colleague Udita Chaturvedi.
Thank you, Priyanka. Good afternoon, everyone. From gender inequality to lack of access to education, sanitation, and safe drinking water, the challenges facing India are large, many, and complex. The sheer scale of these problems, their multidimensional nature, and the development fraternity's own acknowledgement makes it clear that no single individual, organization, or government has the resources or influence to deliver change at the required scale and pace. With India alone accounting for 20% of the world's performance gap for 10 of the 17 SDGs, our most promising strategy to achieve impact at scale by 2030 seems to be the strategic consolidation of efforts towards common agendas and outcomes. Having said that, there is no singular or one-size-fits-all solution. Designing and managing a large-scale multi-stakeholder collaborative is an ambitious task that involves various complex components. Every collaborative has a unique vision and focus, from a collaborative like the National Fecal Sludge and Septic Management Alliance to the collaborators for transforming education. There is great diversity in the kind of collaboratives that are now part of the Indian development ecosystem. Dasra, too, has always believed in the power of collaboratives and has showcased their strengths through initiatives such as the Dasra Giving Circles and the Dasra Girl Alliance. But our deepest experiences of collaborative comes from the journey of the 10 to 19 Dasra Adolescents Collaborative. This was launched in 2017 to impact 5 million adolescent lives over 5 years. The collaborative unites funders, technical experts, and governments and nonprofits by adopting an outcome-led and cross-sectoral approach to empowering India's adolescents. Towards this effort, Dasra has been publishing the annual collaborative series in partnership with Bank of America for the last 5 years. This is because Dasra realizes the power of knowledge sharing and learning. In order to fuel collaborative action and drive transformative impact, Dasra realized early on in this collaborative that it is integral to document the process and share its learning and insights with not just the partners, but with the sector at large. The first report in the collaborative series, titled Collaborative Force, was released in 2018. The report made a case for collaborative giving and served as a how-to guide to lay the foundation for a multi-stakeholder collaborative. The second report, Collaborative Action, dived deeper into the how-to of the process of selecting the right implementing partners and gearing up for action. Today, we are set to release the third report in the series, titled Collaborative Pathways. The report explores the various approaches that multi-stakeholder collaborators can take to implementation, what considerations they must take into account as they determine the best approach, and what does it take to engage in a collaborative implementation. The report, which is now available online, shares quite a few spotlights, but I would like to highlight a few here today. There's no single or right approach to implementation in a collaborative. It can take several forms and must be considered in the context of the collaborative's vision, priorities, and resources, among others. Implementation is expensive and requires adequate funding, not only for the program activities, but also for the large amount of time and effort that goes into project managing, designing, and planning these activities. Effective implementation requires a strong understanding and respect of local and cultural sensitivities, along with early buy-in and support from key stakeholders, such as community members and local government bodies. While aligning the collaborative's partners, managing complex, dynamic, and converging diverse agendas towards a shared vision of impact are important considerations throughout the life cycle of a collaborative. They become even more critical to focus on as the collaborative reaches the implementation phase. And lastly, there's no such thing as a perfect plan. Collaboratives that are agile and begin execution while continuing to adapt their strategies can establish a cycle of quick wins and consistent momentum that keeps the partners aligned to the vision and energized by the possibilities. May I now request the team from Bank of America to please come on stage to release collaborative pathways. I would also request Anand Bhagwati and Shailja Mehta to join on stage. And can we please have Reena and Deepa, our young adolescent girls from Jharkhand. Bank of America is one of the leading financial institutions of the world, and they've been supporting Dasra in documenting the knowledge and learnings of the 10 to 19 collaborative approach for the last 3 years. Can we have some photo ops with the covers on and some without the covers after? As we continue to gather learnings along the ongoing implementation journey of 10 to 19, we hope to document more insights on this critical aspect of multi-stakeholder collaboratives. Thank you so much. May I please request Kaku and Shailja to stay back on the stage? And I'll hand over to Shailja now, who will be moderating the panel.
Thank you. We're just setting up. Have a seat, Kaku. Can I please invite the other co-panelists, Anand Bhagwati, please can you also take stage, and Pritha from Bridgespan, can you also please join us? Pritha, Anand, please come. If I could just direct you, Pritha, if you could sit next to Kaku. And could I also request Professor Srinivas Chary to come up on stage with us? And Anand and Chary next to each other. I'm being slightly directive in this, so please bear with me. A very quick round of introductions. So we have with us Kaku Nakhate, President and India Country Head for Bank of America. We have Pritha Venkatachalam, who is partner at the Bridgespan office. We have Professor Srinivas Chary, who is Director of the Center of Urban Governance, Environment, Energy, and Infrastructure Development at the Administration Staff College of India. And we have Anand Bhagwati with us, who is the Director at Dasra. It is said that the panel discussion was invented by somebody who liked to sit 3 feet above his audience, talk to his best friends, 5 or 4 of his best friends for an hour straight, completely disregarding the 100 people watching them in usually uncomfortable chairs. However, since we have the privilege of sitting here in this wonderful, beautiful place, and we're defying the inventor anyway, we've gone one step further, and we're trying to have some fun with this discussion. So, this panel is called Collaborative, to be or not to be. And the idea is that, right now, this whole concept of collaboratives, any kind of collaboratives, you talk about philanthropic collaboratives, you talk about implementation collaboratives, you talk about advocacy collaboratives, it's quite a buzzword. However, what we were hoping to do is kind of deep dive and just drive into it straight with some of our panelists who've been part of collaboratives. What is it like to be a part of collaborative? What is it like to support a collaborative? What are the challenges? When should one collaborate? When should one not collaborate? And that's what we're going to really get into. And therefore, we're going to try and have some fun with this. We're going to have kind of two teams in a way, not to oppose each other, but to build on each other. And so we have Anant and Chary here, who are going to talk about the real challenges. What does it take? What hasn't worked? And we have Pritha and Kaku, who are going to be slightly more positive and optimistic about it and talk to us about the advantages and what is kind of, the key ingredients for us as part of the collaborative. I just want to warn the panel. I'm the moderator. Please don't, differ with each other out of turn and look to me and I will let you all speak. Okay, as I take my seat. So I wanted to start, Kaku, with you. You've been part of investing in the collaborative as the Bank of America, and you've invested in the 10 to 19 Adolescents Collaborative. Can you tell us a little bit about what were the strengths of a collaborative that attracted you to investing in this structure?
Hello. Yeah. So, first of all, great 11 years for your conference, so wish you all the best. It has been a pleasure and a real different kind of a ride investing in collaborative. And I thought that as Bank of America, we should play a leading role to try the concept of a collaborative. And why do I say that? Is we are all used to, in the corporate world, competing. I'm very interested that Bank of America is ahead of JP Morgan or Citibank, and we're always competing. But to some of the things that were pointed out in the SDG goals, I think we really need a sustainable and a long-term impact, and one which is really scalable in a different manner, and kind of, be able to test some of the newer, models that really need to transform India. And that's when we really liked the idea when Dasra came to us and said that would you all be interested in working with us as on a collaborative. Just ahead of us that we had done anyway a report on building capacities, and we realized working with NGOs for so long that the biggest challenge is scaling up, and that's where we thought that the collaborative does make a sense. And what we have been able to understand, at least, is yes, scale is given an importance. Second is multifaceted think tanks come together, each having a different objective and need to find a search for common objective for the collaborative. Third is everybody brings a different skill set in the collaborative. So the collaborative can be much sharper, and we've seen that over a period of time. And then the final thing I would say that the impact that you can measure is also of a larger scale. So I do hope as we go through the collaborative, we will be able to influence policy and decision making. And that's what we really are really looking forward to. And I have had you can't say that the journey has been totally cool. It's been spikes there. But I think as every year goes, we are becoming more sharper. And together, we are inventing what the right model should be.
Thanks, Kaku. And, I think nobody can argue that coming together for a cause, having objectives, and working towards a common goal is important. But if I can just ask Professor Chary, running the secretariat of the NFSSM Alliance and being part of some of the WASH collaborative that you are a part of also, I think you've had a good sense and you've had an experience of what are, let's not say challenges, but what are the vulnerabilities, right? Where are you vulnerable? What are the risks that come with trying to bring together all of these different players? And it's a lovely term that we've heard from some of our implementing partners. In the morning, there was a session where we spoke about no egos, no logos. It's simple to say, but it's difficult to implement. So can you comment on this and also respond to what Kaku said?
Yeah, thank you. So actually, it's a dilemma. I work in quite a few collaboratives. I'm currently running a startup collaborative in the wash space and part of the Fecal Sludge Alliance. So, so I'll play the devil's advocate in this case rather than speaking the truth. So, if I may say so. Yeah, I mean, I think it's also some experience of running some political collaboratives, political networks we used to run. The biggest, I would say, challenge or the roadblock, I would say, is alignment. Alignment of vision, alignment of, I would say, value systems. Because most of the time, those who are working in the development sector, they come with a very personalized experiences, personalized vision, and bringing them to a common agenda is one aspect, but alignment of the vision is a big, big challenge. So I think that's one of the experiences why many collaborations fail. Let me give you an example. It's like the difference between a magnet and a piece of iron. In a magnet, the molecules are all scattered all over. In a magnet, in a piece of iron, molecules are all scattered around. Whereas in a piece of iron, in a piece of magnet, you see all these molecules are properly aligned. So you get the power. But getting that energy alignment in collaboration is one of the biggest challenge that we experience. That's one. Second is, many a times when people collaborate, there are different positions, mindsets. One is about a rational mindset. Second is a very emotional mindset. And the third is, of course, could be a moral mindset. For example, a great video is floating around created by Tata Trust. My father runs the nation. It's a video in Bombay, which is very, very emotional, but it highlights the importance of waste segregation rather than the worker safety, worker well-being, rather than the worker concerns and the need for undertaking. So that's a very moralistic mindset rather than a rational perspectives. So the same video can be interpreted, same positioning can be viewed in a different way. So I think the biggest challenge in collaboration I see is alignment of leadership to a common agenda, and also working together for the common agenda, in my view, is the biggest challenge we experience.
Thanks, Professor Chary. And Pritha, before I come to you, just pushing that further, Anant, if I can ask you, in terms of getting people to align, as Dasra, there are 2 collaboratives that Dasra runs, but I know we have the privilege of getting to know many other collaboratives across the globe, and in India, being learners and observers in that space as well as participants. What do you think are kind of the recipes, what is the recipe for disaster in a way, or the risks that just don't work to bring the collaborative together, or what should the mindset not be or be?
No, thank you. This is a this is a tough one, given I'm just coming out of a collaborative meeting. Let me say something a little provocative, right? Collaboration without a very tangible hair-raising goal is endless cups of coffee. Collaboration without a hair-raising, inspiring, extremely clear goal is endless cups of coffee. And the reason I say that is, if I look at 2 collaborations, the United Nations and the Indian Freedom Movement, the Indian Freedom Movement had extreme diversity, completely different, like Professor says, mental models, very different backgrounds. The diversity you can imagine, all elements were there. I come from a state in the northeast of India where there was almost, it was forgotten. It was almost handed over to China at that time. But what held the whole thing together was the fact that there is a common, tangible, like no caveats ambition. It was almost hair-raising. My grandfather was part of the freedom struggle. I mean, he went to jail, and there was a time when it was not clear whether India will get freedom. But when the movement started, it actually put it out there saying we are going after freedom, no caveats. Look at other collaboratives where the goal is not clear. And then it becomes a set of never-ending processes and meetings and all of that. So no debates against collaboratives, but I guess the single big thing which is a red flag to me is if one cannot wake up any member of the collaborative in the middle of the night and say, what are you shooting for? And if the answer doesn't pop up in like 5 or 6 simple words, there is a problem which needs to be introspected about, I guess.
Thank you for that. And taking on this analogy of recipes and cooking, Pritha, what according to you, because as Bridgespan, you know, you all have authored lots of articles, you just recently launched a report on philanthropic collaboratives in India, and you have access to a lot of the global collaboratives also. So what do you think are the key ingredients now to make these collaboratives work as per all of your research and studies and your perspective too?
Sure. So I think the picture that comes to mind really is like a tug of war where clearly the power of many is so obvious where, you know, if you have the strength of many people pulling in the same direction, then the rope obviously moves towards your side versus, you know, one side where if there are only a few and they're not pulling in the same direction, then it's no way you're going to win a tug of war. And I think the morning, you know, the framing of the individual discussions that you all had, as well as Gagan's very inspiring session on inequity, just shows how big some of the issues we are tackling are and how it really needs the power of many stakeholders coming together. So I think here, I'm reminded of my school, college, and debating days, and Shailja has given us a clear mandate to be for the topic and leave the guests on this side to be against, so I'll stick to script. But if the question really is, what does it take for collaboratives to succeed? Over the last 6-8 months, we have deeply been studying a particular type of multi-stakeholder collaborative in India where different stakeholders anchored by philanthropy have really set a shared vision or goal where there's a clear matching of value systems, the theory of change that they want to have to bring about social change, and actually bringing in shared capabilities and resources towards that. And we found that there are 3 big areas where these collaboratives can actually work. And the first one is where people are looking at a very scaled issue or impact, where, for example, if you're looking at bringing about change across multiple districts or states of India, it's very difficult for 1 or 2 stakeholders, whether they are a funder or a nonprofit, to really create change. So there is the power of many that plays to scale impact. The second area is where the field is very nascent and you're really looking to build it out. And we have examples like climate change, independent journalism, or indeed even Dasra's example of adolescents, where there's not been as much of a spotlight put on an issue and multiple stakeholders coming together really enhances the potential for impact. So I think that's the second area where we saw collaboratives truly succeed. And the third area is where there's a high element of risk or where there's an innovation that needs to be proven, where philanthropy can really play the role of risk capital, because as we know, whether it's CSR or government, there's often the tendency to go towards proven solutions where there are answers and you're looking to scale up a particular solution. But where there is really no one clear answer, there is clearly a scope for different stakeholders to come together and try out that solution. So we found that in those 3 scenarios, the power of collaboratives is far more enhanced, whereas in many other areas, maybe the power of one, as Edelgive's Edge event earlier this year seemed to suggest, can also be powerful. But for the power of many to really come to life, there are really these particular circumstances where collaboratives can really help succeed. And to just build on some of the devil's advocate points that we heard, one of the key elements we heard time and again is building of trust. And I can't underscore that more. You know, really building strong trust across stakeholders, not having a siloed approach where 1 or 2 organizations have a bigger say than others is really imperative for the collaborative to succeed. And different stakeholders have brought together this trust right from the coming together stage where they've enhanced channels of communication and really built a very strong sense of being on one side of that tug of war to really work together. And I think that really underscores the success of a collaborative across its stages. And once that trust breaks down in any way, then clearly there is much more need for the stakeholders to work together to make it all stick. So I think that was our #1 learning in our study.
And Kaku, if I can then come to you. Thanks, Pritha, because I just want to take off from there and talking about trust. You know, as institutions like Bank of America make these investment decisions, it's not a one-person choice. There's a committee, there's a process, and obviously investing in something like a collaborative is not an easy sell, if I may say so. So can I ask you, just from your personal experience, one is that maybe you and some of your team members were attracted to or understood the concept of a collaborative. How were you able to convince your board members, your committee members, whoever it took, about this and for this?
So I would say, again, investing in a collaborative, India has been the first one really to go into investing in a collaborative. I think the point that she made here on trust is very important. And we were confident also because we worked on adolescent in one-on-one capacity in many of the NGOs before. And we also had seen some of the partners like Tata Trust, Kiava Trust, again, you know, and met some of them at your conferences who had also worked on adolescent girls. So one of the things that was very clear to us is that everybody had one purpose which was very clear, which was the cohort that we were addressing. And having done few reports on that, it gave us the confidence that yes, the implication would be there. And I think the beauty of the collaboration was that over and above what you do together for a girl child, right from the time she enters to the school to the time that she becomes economically empowered, and then she has a life that leads a change and has a transgenerational impact. I think the structure which allowed that for measuring impact, even if you were doing independent work on adolescent girls, you could also upload that information. And that's where I felt that we have lots of work, as I have said before, to do on the data that we are generating. But this combination really gave us a lot more comfort to really pushing. As far as pushing more agenda internally is concerned, I have the best head of CSR, Neha, who drives us to the wall, and she made it happen.
And just one more step further in trust, coming to that side. You know, talking about trust and collaboration, those are good words and terms. Impact is very important to measure, but in a collaborative, you're essentially dealing with very complex problems. You're not going to have beyond activity output level results coming in for some time. You have to have that patience. What does it take? Can anybody measure collaboration, effective collaboration? That the fact that you have trust or that you're getting there? What has been your experience, Professor Chary and Anand? We'd just like to, you know, kind of pause after that.
No, measuring impact is not very difficult as such. But I think what would be important is how do you build trust between partners? I think that's where you need a very strong intermediary who can facilitate this trust building exercise. So I think our experience shows that if you have a very credible intermediary who facilitates different partnerships and create a good governance structure which would bring equity in terms of participation, voice, resource sharing, I think the trust can be built over a period of time. So the key in this case, probably Dasra could be a good intermediary to build people together, to build trust among network members. So I'm just giving an example. So same thing, our institute, ASCII, plays a very critical role in building trust, whether it's a political forum or a forum involving technical personnel, startups, that I think the intermediary is very critical, and then creating a governance for all the parties to speak to each other in a very coherent way. I think these are the two ingredients of success. And then from there we can, measuring the impact can be taken forward.
Thank you. So I think this is, and so it's a struggle measuring a little bit, because this is the classic sum of parts question. If there was A plus B plus C and A plus B plus C do something, the question is if A plus B plus C come together, is that significantly more than the individuals to make up for the cost, time, and, frankly, it's difficult to collaborate, So the real question is, what is the sum of parts? How much is the sum of parts more than individual? I think one practical way we have seen is to just define what can A, B, and C alone not do, which the collaborative could. And just to take one example, it could be, okay, we came together with one unified report on something, pitched to the government, and government trusted the collaborative more than individual. It's very tangible. It's also specific enough to energize the collaborative, and it also keeps, so having tangible annual goals like this, to keep putting it in front of the collaborative, saying this one thing, or these three things, you could not have done individually, but because you came together, you achieved. And then finding a very sharp definition of that, I think, is important. So I think it's not easy, but going back to that first point of alignment, if that is not clear, then the question will, and again, this is one of those things where no one will ask the question, but the question is in everyone's mind, which is, collaboration is not easy. It takes time, effort, money. So then what is the incremental sum of parts of a collaborative achieving?
And last comments, Pritha and Kaku.
So actually, surprisingly, we found that it's a bit of a conundrum, the term collaboration. So as we are hearing, it has become the buzzword, as Shailja said in introductory remarks. But then a lot of informal collaborations have clearly taken place over centuries in India in the social sector. But very formal collaborations where results are defined, there's alignment-driven, governance structures set up, impact measurements put in place are actually more nascent in India than several other parts of the globe. So if you look at the global arena, agencies like Gavi or the Global Fund, Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition have been around for a few decades, and several of them are at different stages of evolution. But if you look at the Indian social sector landscape, formal collaborations are not that many. And I think the real test here is, how many actors are willing to really put in that additional effort to come together for a common goal. Because often they find that after one or two partners have come together, it's much easier to achieve that goal than getting 5 or 6 players around the table. And there, I think impact measurement becomes key, partly because you need to re-energize the group constantly to make sure that there is a common energy as well as a common enthusiasm around that tough goal. And I think here I'd like to borrow the words of Chris Gopalakrishnan, who had set up the Center for Brain Research in the Indian Institute of Science. And one of the things he was telling us as he was trying to get together different stakeholders is that, to actually find a cure for dementia might take decades. And India might never actually find that cure for dementia. But then over each year, you need to set up winnable milestones or, outputs or outcome indicators that different partners could be energized by. Or similarly, if you look at Dasra 10 to 19, clearly Shailja can talk to more of the experience, but it's important to set aside funds as well as goals in a more bite-sized way so that the partners can feel energy in coming together. Because once you're only looking at that big hair-raising, audacious goal, which may be only achieved 5-10 years down, then you might start losing partners and the funding, because we haven't yet touched that holy grail. But what we also found in our study is that raising funding and unrestricted long-term funding for collaboratives might actually be far trickier than raising funding for an NGO standalone. So I think once we combine the holy grail of impact and fundraising together, then the challenge is really quadrupled.
My experience based on what our collaborative was, I think in the first couple of, first 6 months, I think goal setting is important, and it becomes important to share what each other's objectives are and come across a common framework. It is that point of time that the people who are participating in the collaborative need to be transparent with each other. You could have some objectives which are very clear, and there could be some side goals which each one would have. I would encourage the partners who are conducting to get everybody on the same page, and as long as you understand that 70 to 75% is a common purpose, then the final answer would be a lot more stronger. What would go wrong is if you kept on, being good to each other, not having those debates, which you have to do initially, then you can end up where at the end of 1 year or 2 years, funding would become a problem. The second point I just wanted to say is the good thing Dasra did was in the collaboration when they forced people to think that you need to fund for 3 years at bare minimum. That was important because it made a lot of people, when you are committing for 3 years together, you definitely need to put your head to work. You need to buy the common purpose. And then you know that you've already committed the funds, which is one of the incentives to really make it work. I think the only thing which I would say is the impact has to be measured much more regularly, not for the point of seeing the end result, but being able to strategize like any corporate would do. The collaborative should be seen like a corporate at work.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all so much. But keep seated. We have a poll for the audience. Please go to your applications, apps, and there, if you open the DPW 2020 app, you will see something called a poll. And the question that we have for you in this is, do you think the strengths of a collaborative outweigh its challenges? So take a minute to poll, and then we'll see which side has been most convincing. Is there anybody else who's still waiting to vote? What is it looking like? Oh. Looks like we have a clear front runner. Okay. So, winners, congratulations. But I think the clear winners are the audience and ourselves for lots of learnings and a good debate.
It's the girl power.
It's the girl power. And you know, to be or not to be obviously is an ode to Shakespeare. So I want to end with his couplet from Hamlet. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing, end them. So thank you for coming together to oppose them and therefore end them. Thank you.